when they gave him a Bible, but when I gave him a piece of iron ore, his whole demeanor changed. I said, swear on this, and his entire attitude towards the just changed completely, and that's just fantastic learning,
That's it. That's it.
Thanks, Anish. I think we can start now. It's 5
Yes.
o'clock. Anil?
So,
Sir, shall I start?
You can start.
How many? There are still some people waiting to enter the room.
83 are there. 85.
It is 85.
So we'll start, sir?
Yes, you can start.
Okay. Good evening. Namaskar. Welcome to day 2 of the 5th International Virtual Mediation Summer School 2024, presented by Nivaran, mediators of the Supreme Court of India, in collaboration with the Singapore International Mediation Center and the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. My name is Anil Srivastav, and I'm an advocate mediator in the Supreme Court of India, and I will be your host for today's session. There are 3 topics today for the session. The first is the historical perspective of dispute resolution, then the development of legal systems and culture. So today's topics will take you on a journey spanning several centuries, covering the jurisprudential aspects of mediation, starting from what is the history of dispute resolution? Has evolution played a role in the development of a sense of justice? If yes, then what are the stages of this evolution? Where does mediation fit into this evolution of a sense of justice? And does mediation have any jurisprudential basis in any of our legal theories? So from the history of dispute resolution to enacting the Indian Mediation Act 2023, today's session will explore the entirety of these issues. And sharing his views and immense knowledge and over 4 decades of experience on these topics is our guest faculty, Shri A.J. Jawad, who's an advocate, mediator, global faculty, life skills coach, and trainer par excellence. Incidentally, most of us at Nivaran have at some point of time received our training under Jawad sir. If I tell you just a little bit about Jawad sir, he's an attorney at law for over 35 years, practicing in the Madras High Court. He's a senior mediator with over 15 years of extensive experience in the field of mediation, specializing in civil, commercial, and matrimonial mediations. He is a senior trainer with the Mediation and Conciliation Project Committee of the Supreme Court of India. He is a senior trainer of the Tamil Nadu Mediation and Conciliation Center. He has conducted training, mediation training programs, advanced mediation training programs. He is an accredited mediator by the Singapore International Mediation Institute. He has conducted mediation and training programs in universities across India and the UK. Jawad sir is also a faculty of the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. He's written innumerable articles and won many awards and citations for outstanding mediation skills, for being a mediation teacher, mentor, delivering quality training, and coaching in mediation. So you have a very, very experienced mediator trainer before you today who will take you through today's topics. However, before inviting Jawad sir to explore the issues and questions of today's topics, I just wanted to share an interesting fact which I came across recently while doing a bit of research myself on today's topics. Many of you might know it, but I did not know, so I just thought I'll just share it with you. The Scandinavian countries have a god, Forseti, who is the god of justice and mediation. And if I may just read a few lines about him. Forseti does not wield a sword but words. He settles disputes between humans and gods and is a symbol of harmony and order. His principles mirror our modern justice systems, emphasizing mediation over conflict. His message is, true strength lies in fair resolution, not battle. So from theories of mediation, laws of mediation, we also have a god of mediation. Very fascinating. I now invite Jawad sir to share his views on today's topics. As always, this is going to be a session where the participants can ask your questions by sending them on the chat box. At the end of Jawad sir's talk, subject to the constraints of time, Jawad sir will answer all your questions. Jawad sir, session is yours.
Thank you, Anil, and thank you, Nivaran. And see, the whole idea of this topic actually came up in a very random way when I was having a talk with Santan. And he was kind enough to drop me in the airport when I was in Delhi, and we were just discussing this. And he said, "Why don't you talk about this in the Nivaran summer school?" I was not really sure whether I should do it, but then nobody can say no to Santan. So I agreed, and here I am with you. So friends, see, what we are going to be discussing now, there are different perspectives that are possible in this. So the whole idea of this discussion is only to place a few thoughts before you and invite you to do a little more research on it, perhaps, if you're interested, because the whole topic today is a purely academic one. If you ask me what is the practical implication of it in my practice as a mediator or in my understanding of the mediation process, I may not be able to answer you that. So therefore, I would like you to just look at it from a very academic perspective. And like all academic perspectives, it is subject to challenge. It is subject to questioning. It is not a perfect, understanding, or may not be a perfect exposition of what it is. Or it's open to, again, it's a matter of perspective. So I was thinking about this topic for a very long time, and as I was researching for it, I came across a very interesting article by Dennis Krebs, where he talks about the evolution of the sense of justice. And he looks at this from the perspective of how this sense of justice evolved from, how it actually how we acquired this over, the process of evolution till we reached into this highly evolved state of being Homo sapiens or human beings. So I'll just share a PowerPoint presentation, but this PowerPoint presentation is only meant to keep me anchored, so that I don't, I don't get lost in the topic, because it's so huge and it is so complex that, it's very difficult to stay anchored to what we are discussing. So just to keep myself anchored, and I just want to check with Anil, how much time do I have, Anil? What is the...
So you have about a minimum of 30 minutes.
30 minutes. So.
Up to about 30 to 40 minutes, yes.
So 30 to 40 minutes is, it's not much of a time, but yes, enough time perhaps to just, put in a nutshell how the process of evolution shaped our sense of justice. Now, we all have a sense of justice. We all have a sense of fairness. Okay, and I wanted to actually make it interactive, but the participants are so many that it will become impossible to have a direct conversation with each other. So what I'm trying to do now is just to speak about what is in my mind, put it across to you, and then invite you to ask questions, to come up with your own perspectives, and perhaps we can try to discuss it a little more in depth. So I'll just share the PowerPoint with you now. Let's see how it goes. From there, we'll take it. I hope you're able to see it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. So when, we all, as I said earlier, we all have the sense of justice, the sense of fairness. Like imagine that you're waiting in the queue to buy tickets for your favorite cricket match. And it's a very crucial match, and there's a huge crowd and there's a long line. And there's a very strong person, very muscular person who just elbows himself past you and tries to reach the front of the line. Obviously, you're not going to like it, and you'll feel that it is very unfair. And you may feel, too intimidated by his size to really challenge him, but that will, give rise to a kind of a very strong resentment in your mind against this person. that is one aspect. Now here, your sense of fairness is violated because you feel it's very unfair of this person to, just elbow his way into, ahead of you and, stop you from getting the ticket where you are entitled to be there. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, imagine in a similar situation, you see a very luxurious car just driving into, let's say somebody like one of the Ambanis is sitting inside and they are just going directly into the stadium and they're being received and they're being taken to the special pavilion where they can watch the match in air-conditioned comfort, and all the while you're struggling to make your way inside. Would you feel the same sense of unfairness or injustice that you see in that? So now what happens here is that sometimes that kind of an unfairness, we just take it for granted because we feel that that person is entitled to be there, and therefore we don't really grudge them that. Whereas if a person like us just elbows his way past us and pushes us away, we feel violated actually. So now where does the sense of justice or sense of fairness come from? How did it get ingrained in us? Now, there are different reasons. One is, the psychological origins of a sense of justice. Normally, if you ask somebody, where did you learn to be fair? Where did you learn to be reasonable? Where did you learn to be just? People will say it is a social learning. We learned it from our parents, or we learned it from our teachers. So a lot of this is being taught to us by our parents, by our teachers, by our peers, by the society we live in. So we learn a lot of this from society. Then also there's something that is moral reason that we have as we grow up, because initially we learn from our parents and our teachers. As we grow up, we develop our own reasoning. So we indulge in moral reasoning and try to justify, or we try to reason out, and we feel bad when there's some injustice is being done. So we have a sense of moral reasoning, and also how it affects us, the affective mechanisms. What kind of emotions does the situation trigger in us? Do we feel angry? Do we feel violated? Do we feel upset about what is happening? So that can also have an impact in how we understand what is just and what is fair. So this is one aspect. But going back, how did all this come about in the first place? This is where this article by the evolution of the sense of justice by Dennis L. Krebs. I was reading this, and he talks about the four methods, four ways in which this whole thing evolved. So the first one is the cooperative behavioral dispositions. So basically, you can find this even in animals, because you'll find animals hunting in packs. You'll find them moving in herds. Now, basically, that cooperation comes about because it has its benefits. It has its own evolutionary benefits because it ensures your survival and it gives you protection, and therefore it makes sense to work together. I was just preparing for this topic. I was watching a few videos on YouTube of how lions hunt. They hunt in packs, and the buffaloes move in herds, but the lions attack them. Now, I was just thinking that imagine if the buffaloes were not moving in herds. Let's say that I'm a buffalo and I don't want to move with the herd. I want to graze by myself because I'm not, unlike the lions, I'm not competing. Actually, I'm competing for the pastoral land where I'm grazing. So I don't want to share it, and I want to graze alone over there. And I'm grazing alone. What are the chances of survival? If I'm attacked by a pack of lions, I'll fall an easy victim to that. But if I move with the herd, my chances of survival increase. They become better because I may not be the next victim. So it might be somebody, my chances of becoming the next victim of the lions get substantially reduced, and I get the chance to survive. So a lot of evolutionary theorists say that, this cooperative behavior or working together is there in animals also, and that's a gene that has been passed on from one generation to the other. So basically animals learn to behave in such a way that they cooperate with each other. Now, this cooperation is basically to maximize the benefit, to get the maximum benefit. Like if lions hunt in a pack, a single lion can perhaps be, torn apart by a bull or by a buffalo with its very strong horns. But if they are in a pack, they stand a better chance of bringing down the buffalo, which perhaps is much stronger than the lion. So there is an advantage in working in groups, and this is sort of, this is understood by animals when they work together. Now, the next thing is, what happens if supposing we are working together and we get some benefit out of it? What about the distribution of that benefit? How does that work? And that is where, sometimes might becomes right. Now, one of the things that I learned about lions is that the lionesses do most of the hunting. And what happens is, once they bring the, victim down, the lion comes first and has his share. And after he finishes, the lionesses and the cubs go and eat what is left over. So here, what happens, the whole thing, if you look at it, from the perspective of fairness and justice, it's totally unjust. We have this term of lion's share. I think perhaps this lion's share concept came from that, where the lion does nothing, just sits while the lionesses are hunting and then goes and eats from the animal that is hunted. And then the lionesses who have really done the hard work, they go and eat. Now, this is something that we even see in our society, perhaps, right? So where there is the distribution of resources is not balanced. There is a concentration of resources in a few hands. And people who generally do the work, the actual work, are not able to get the full benefit of the work that they do. So, and this is where, the strategic interactions comes into place. And this strategic interaction is seen among animals, among the primates, the more developed, which are nearer our nearest cousins. The primates, you can see this. And this was, there's a lot of research done by this person called Franz de Waal, W-A-A-L. There's a very interesting book he has written. It's called The Age of Empathy, where he basically, I haven't read the book fully now, I've just started reading it. But my understanding of that, the beginning of the book, is that he's simply debunking all the legal theories about the evolution of sense of justice, and he's focusing more on the empathetic aspect of evolution. So in animals, in primates, we see this, that, strategic interactions, basically what you mean by strategic interactions is, I'll come to that a little more. It's basically what is called as one good turn deserves another. So primates remember somebody helping them and try to help them back. And if somebody harms them, they harm them back. So these strategic interactions actually, sort of keep things in order, because what happens is, that if you are not fair with somebody, that other person is not going to be fair with you. And if you're going to be fair with somebody, the other person is also going to be fair with you. So there is some way of, keeping the balance over there, because when you cooperate with each other and you are able to enhance the benefit, especially the fitness of evolution, being fit enough to evolve further. Now that kind of thing, by the strategic interactions, the benefit is ensured for everybody, not just for the one person who might be very strong. Now, as human beings evolved, we started having, depending more on moral judgments and norms, we started evolving certain norms and, based on morality. And then we went on to develop the concept of justice. So this is basically just an outline. So it starts with the evolutionary aspect of cooperative behavior that enhances the fitness benefit. Then the strategic interactions to ensure that the fruits of the cooperation are equitably shared with everyone. Then you go further into the moral judgments and norms and the conception of justice. So enhancing fitness through cooperation, this creates the identity of interest, because it is in our interest to work together. to cooperate with each other to get the maximum benefit out of a situation. So there is an identity of interest, but when it comes to the distribution of the benefits of cooperation, there's a conflict of interest. Because there is a element of selfishness somewhere, and we want to get more than what we really deserve. We don't want to share with everybody. So this evolution of fairness, as I was saying, the evolution of sense of fairness. So this was observed, as I said earlier, by Franz de Waal in chimpanzees. So one good turn deserves another, an eye for an eye. So this is a sort of a strategic interaction that helps to ensure that people help each other. The benefits of the cooperation are divided equitably between people. So animals react negatively to those who treat them badly. Because generally, if you see that in a chimpanzee, if one chimpanzee has hurt the other chimpanzee, this chimpanzee is not going to like it. Or if one chimpanzee has snatched the food of the other chimpanzee, that chimpanzee is not going to like it and it's going to react negatively. But what happens if one chimpanzee snatches the food of another chimpanzee and there's a third chimpanzee in the picture who's watching this? What does that chimpanzee feel? Probably nothing. But among human beings, that additional experience of emotional reaction is there. Because when some injustice is being done to a third person, human beings have the potential or the ability to feel that, oh, this is unfair. So what's happening? I don't like it. So this ability is there in human beings. Now, how this ability is used to, to ensure that the selfishness is kept to the minimum and the strategic interactions are more fair, is where, because people generally react more strongly to being treated unfairly than to treating others unfairly. That is something we find, that is why most of the conflict arises. If you see most of the conflict, you'll see that fairness is a very subjective criteria. There is no objective way of measuring fairness. So people feel that, okay, my father has left me less property than my brother has got more. So therefore my father has been unfair to me. So I feel very strongly about that because I have been dealt with unfairly by my father. So we have that habit of, reacting very strongly if we feel or we perceive an unfairness being done to us. But what about us treating others? While we hold other people to very high standards of fairness, do we also hold ourselves to that level of fairness? And as bystanders, if you're observing an injustice being done, do you feel the pain of that victim as strongly as the victim feels that pain? The fact is, humans feel affected if they see injustice. And that is the core value of empathy that is developed in humans. Because as we understand, because human beings evolved, they went beyond animals. We started developing the frontal cortex. We developed the ability to communicate. We developed the ability to enter into complex social interactions. Because with the discovery of agriculture, while we were hunters and gatherers, we were interacting with each other. And that strategic interaction was as good as how chimpanzees would interact with each other. But as we became agriculturists and started staying in settlements, and those settlements became villages, and those villages became towns, and the towns became cities, our interactions started getting more and more complex. So we as human beings engage in more complex forms of social exchange due to the acquisition of the intellectual and linguistic capabilities. Now we are able to, when we feel that there has been some unfairness, or we feel that there has been some injustice, we are able to articulate that in a better way. And our own actions, we are able to justify in a much better way because we are able to use words. We are able to articulate. And as Anil pointed out, the Nordic god, which he mentioned, I'm forgetting the name that he mentioned. Anil, what was the name of that god? Sorry, you're muted. Okay, that's okay. But that Nordic god used words instead of sword. So the statue of justice, as we see, always carries a sword in the hand, whereas the Nordic god has used words. So we have the power of language to articulate, ourselves. Now, when you come back to the strategic interactions that we have, how do we balance out, or how do we ensure that the product or the fruits of the cooperative behavior are equitably distributed or equitably shared? There are many things that have happened over the course of evolution of human beings, because one is, of course, the intellectual and linguistic capabilities that we developed. And then we also went on to, but these things are, double-edged swords. So this is what Dennis L. Krebs says, that while they enable more complex forms of cooperation, we also develop complex forms of cheating also. Well, how do we, because we have the ability to explain, we have the ability to buttress our judgments with words. So we are able to, we are able to, mislead people into believing that we are doing them a favor. Okay, we have that ability to talk to people and talk them into doing many things that they may not otherwise do. So we are able to, the way we are able to enhance or, enable the cooperation, we are also able to enable more complex forms of cheating. So we find day in and day out, we hear of various scams happening. People inducing innocent people to, invest in their companies and then running away with all the investment. We keep reading all these reports. So this has, led us to, it is like our language and intelligence has become a sort of a double-edged sword for us. But the fact is that it also gives us the capacity to resolve a complex conflict of interest through negotiation and discussion. And that is what mediation is all about. So what happens now is we have strategic cooperation. We cooperate with each other, because whatever we do, when we live in huge cities, when we live in villages, when we live in settlements, wherever we may be living in, we need to cooperate with each other for our safety, for our security, for maximizing the benefit, for our trade, because I may be producing carrots and Anil might be producing potatoes, and we exchange, we carry on trade. So for all these complex interactions, we are able to use our linguistic and our intelligence, the capabilities that we have developed over evolution, to have a kind of an interaction that is much more complex than what animals are. And we have advanced so much today that we have cash. We deal with cash. We deal with currencies. We deal with companies. We deal with fictitious values, like money itself is a fictitious value. If you go, like Yuval Noah Harari says, if you go and offer $10 to a chimpanzee and tell the chimpanzee, give me your 10 bananas, the chimpanzee will tell you, get lost. How can you give me a piece of paper and ask me for, bananas? The bananas have some value, and I can't understand the value that you're offering me. But if you go and offer that to a human being, the human being will readily exchange that. Okay, because the human being is getting a fictitious value out of that. Okay, so this is how human transactions have evolved. So this ability of ours, now, see, there is an element of selfishness, because we have seen that it can be a double-edged sword. Our intelligence and our language can be a double-edged sword. So we can enhance the cooperation as well as we can enhance cheating each other. Now, how does that get controlled? Now, this is where Darwin says that human beings, along with empathy, they have also developed a sense of shame. Because how do we develop the sense of shame? Because Darwin says man is influenced in the highest degree by the wishes, approbation, and blame of his fellow men as expressed by the gestures and language. So because we are able to express ourselves, our approbation or reprobation of somebody's conduct, that person feels that, okay, I should not do this because I will be inviting the approbation of my fellow human beings, of the people who are in the society in which I'm living with. So that sense of shame is one aspect that helps us to deal fairly with others, apart from the empathy part of it. So the second thing that has evolved also is our conscience. Because conscience is described as a set of internalized images of others that enable people to predict how others will react to their behavior. So when I'm doing something which is not correct by by conventional standards, or which I know that others are not going to like. Others are not going to approve of my conduct. Now I develop an image of that person or the other people looking at me, looking down at me, and telling me that, hey, what you did is wrong. So when I imagine the negative reaction, I feel an anticipatory fear or embarrassment, which I experience as a sense of guilt or shame. Now that is defined as conscience by Dennis Krebs. So this development of the conscience is one thing, shame is another thing, and empathy. Now these three things coexist in us, which help us to, which improve the quality of our strategic interactions and help us to deal with each other better. Now from here, we go a little ahead further down, because apart from these natural impulses that we have, evolved in us over a period of time, we also have a moral argumentation and standard of justice. Now, if I want to deal with somebody and I go and tell them that, look, this is good for me, and I want you to do this for me. Now, the other person is going to ask me, why should I do it if it doesn't give any good to me? So how does it help me? So what is the benefit that I get out of it? So when you are coming up with the moral argument that this is something that is good, then you have to show that it is good for everyone. So there has to be a common standard which should be applied to decide whether something that you do is moral or immoral, or it's incorrect or correct, or it is just or unjust. So this argument is another thing which evolved in human beings with the power of language and with the intellectual capabilities that humans develop. So this was something that further evolved. So now we can see, from the evolutionary perspective, first it starts with the cooperative behavior to enhance the benefits. Number two is the strategic interaction to ensure that the benefits are shared in a proper way. Now, since animals also have that, primates also have that, but it is very personalized for them. Now, when we live in a complex society, when we have a more complex arrangement, we need something more than that. So that is where, the evolution of the sense of shame, the conscience, the empathy, and all these things developed in human beings. From here, human beings advanced further to involving moral argumentation to define what is fair and just. And from there, again, we went forward to refining those by evolving various, ideas of justice. Now, Aristotle says that there are four kinds of justice. One is the distributive justice, which is basically how resources should be distributed. The other is commutative justice, which is honoring agreements, commitments, social contracts. The third is corrective justice, which is basically if somebody commits a crime or a wrong, the revenge, reparation, restitution. And in order to ensure that this justice is delivered effectively and in a balanced and fair manner, you have what is called as procedural justice, which has fair and impartial procedures. So from here, we kept on evolving, and we had various legal theories that came into effect. Now, here is where Darwin makes a distinction between, I'll just stop the screen share here. So Darwin says that apart from the rational and reasoned arguments that we come up with, the moral arguments that we come up with, for something that is more universal, something that is, which can be applicable to all human beings generally. So if you have, for example, if Immanuel Kant says that we need to have a deontological approach to justice, we need to have laws which prescribe, or Thomas Hobbes says that we need a sovereign to control our basic emotions. We are the basic propensity for us to indulge in any kind of uncivilized or barbaric behavior or behave unjustly. We are talking about more evolved theories of law, or how we apply the law, or how we understand the law, and how we evolve this law as a framework for us to, govern the interactions that we have in a society. Now, there are also parallelly, there are other things that have also evolved, because it is more, what should I say? It is more of something which is very relative. For example, in a particular region or in a particular community. It has also led to the evolution of certain norms which border on superstition. Because, for example, religious laws. Now, the religious laws, the whole argument behind the religious law is if you don't obey the law, you will get punished in the hereafter. So in this way, parallelly, both these systems have developed. So here is where culture plays a very significant role, because sometimes the cultural beliefs or the religious beliefs or the kind of customs and traditions that evolve in a particular place become so strong that they trump the the universal concept of justice and fairness. So we have various, like for example, we have well, I don't want to mention any specific practice or anything because I don't want to offend any feelings, but we all know what I'm talking about. We are talking about certain customs and traditions that develop, which are patriarchal, which are misogynistic, which provide for which actually lead to unfair treatment of a group of people. So these kind of practices also evolve. Now sometimes these practices become so powerful that they the general rules of universal behavior get defeated by these practices, and this is where you need a state which is governed by these universal principles to govern it, so that to ensure that justice is done. Now, in all these things, what we have done, what finally has resulted is we have a society which is governed by the rule of law. So under the theory of legal positivism, which was propounded by people like John Austin and others, we have evolved laws now, we have evolved systems now, where we have prescribed the laws, we have prescribed rights and obligations. So there are rights and obligations prescribed under the law, and any violation of those rights and obligations, any violation of the rights or breach of the obligations leads to a punitive result. So whether it might be a breach of contract where compensation or damages might be awarded, where you commit a violation of a person's rights by committing a crime, you are visited with punishment. So this system today has come to prevail. But going back to our basic instinct of how we resolve the conflict of interest between us by using the two abilities that we have, language and intellect, is where mediation plays a very significant. Because we are going by engaging in mediation, we are basically, what we are doing is we are engaging in a facilitated negotiation. So by engaging in a facilitated negotiation, we are using our intellectual and linguistic capabilities to communicate with each other, to understand each other's perspectives, to come to a common ground where we are able to ensure that the benefits of the cooperation are more enhanced and are more equitably distributed. So what I'll do is I'll just pause here. I think whatever I have said, I don't know whether it has made sense to all of you. So any questions that would be, we can have a discussion now. Anil, if you permit me.
Yes, sure, sir.
Can we have a discussion, because I have just tried to explain what the perspective that I was able to understand from the various readings that I have done. Now, as I said earlier, the caveat was that I may be right, I may be wrong. So there might be different perspectives also. So I have placed something. This is a purely academic discussion. And in any academic discussion, there cannot be a conclusive, outcome of an academic discussion, because it's always open to change. It's like science, because science is always open to change and open to new findings, new discoveries, and new understanding. Yes, Mr. Anil?
So, sir, there is one question by, he hasn't given his name, but basically what he says is that because of a large-scale corruption in humans, trying to enrich themselves, there is a sense of unfairness and illegal methodologies which have become the cause of concern.
Correct.
So that this differentiation and discrimination for the past several years, that people have lost confidence on justice, equity, and good conscience. So taking this, how do you bring about the principles of fairness in society when there is so much of discrimination and there is too much of enrichment in one section? You just mentioned about the Ambanis and fairness. So maybe How do you
See,
how do you develop a
that's
sense
actually
of
that's a very good question, and that's a question I think which is at the top of all our minds, right? What we are witnessing, what is happening today in the whole world. Now, I spoke about how evolution has endowed us with three qualities. One is empathy, the other is conscience, and the sense of shame. Now, the best way to overcome all this is to get into politics. Because once you enter politics, then all this goes on the side. You don't really worry about all these things, and you're not you neither feel shame, nor you have a conscience, nor you feel the sense of empathy. Now the fault lies with us, okay? Because are we electing leaders who are empathetic? Are we electing leaders who have a sense of conscience, who have a sense of shame? Or are we electing leaders who just impressed by their, by the way they speak or by the way the various claims that they make? Now, there's a very interesting book which I would recommend. This book was being discussed by Mr. Aruneshwar Gupta also. It's a book by Bill Hardy where he says why we elect narcissists and psychopaths. Now, we get fascinated by power. Okay, as human beings, we get fascinated by power. Now, we try to justify, like, for example, if a billionaire is spending millions and perhaps a few millions on his son's wedding, we try to justify it saying, after all, it's his money and why can't he spend it? Okay, now, how did that money come? It is born out of an inequitable distribution of the cooperative benefits that we could arrive at or we could reach as a society. So this is something that we need to think about. And nobody can give an answer to this except ourselves. So each one of us has to find the answer. And each one of us has to work towards establishing an equitable society. Now, the question that I would like to ask is, if you're seeing an injustice being done somewhere, if you're seeing poor people being deprived of their homes, do we feel angry? Do we ask the government, why are you doing this? What right have you got to do this? We don't. We keep quiet because it's not happening to us, right? When we see corruption happening, unless we are affected directly by it, we are not bothered. We don't ask questions. So how do we expect a just society to evolve unless we are able to make use of these three things that we have: the empathy, the feeling for the pain of others, recognizing the pain of others, understanding the pain of others, the sense of conscience that, are we going to keep quiet seeing this? And the sense of shame that why am I not doing anything about this? So if we are able to, develop these qualities, or maybe we already have these qualities, only thing we need to recognize them and use them. We are not going to be able to change society. So there can be no perfect answer for this question. So this is the only way I feel that we can perhaps, address these questions. And this is something that, in mediation at a micro level, we try to do. Because when parties are sitting across each other, definitely there's one person who's getting more benefit or who's trying to, capitalize on that, or, maybe take advantage of the other person. And what we try to do is we try to, through the power of language and communication, we try to get that person to feel that sense of empathy, connect with each other, understand each other's needs, and help them by asking those questions, which are very important questions, like, how do you feel if you were at the other end of the, at the receiving end of this? So we do it at a micro level, but at a macro level, as a society, we have to work towards it.
So young Ankit Yadav has asked a question: why do we elect psychopaths and narcissists?
Because we are fascinated by power. We are fascinated by power. We love people who appear to be very powerful. Okay, we don't look beyond that facade, and we don't see what kind of a person is there behind that facade. Is that person empathetic? Does that person understand? We don't see that. We are fascinated by the facade that is created, by the imagery that is shown to us.
True.
And this is where, media, social media, all these very powerful things are there that brainwash us, that, convince us into seeing things the way they want us to see. But all we need to do is step back and think and look beyond that.
So there is another question by Mr. Ganeshan Sobian, who's an advocate. He says what distance our current justice system needs is to travel to reach guaranteed justice, a reality from the current guaranteed judgment. So basically, he's saying how do we move from guaranteed judgments to guaranteed justice, and how does mediation help towards this?
See, there is that's a good question from Ganesan. Again, it's a very complex question. So there cannot be a perfect system at all. There's no system can be perfect. Okay, we have to endeavor to make it perfect. Now, see, the problem today with our justice delivery system is when you look at dispute resolution. See, if Anil and I have a dispute, there are two ways of looking at it. One is looking at it from the perspective of right and wrong and get somebody like a judge or an arbitrator to say who's right and who's wrong, or to recognize it as a problem that Anil and I both are facing, and we need to sit across and talk to each other and find a solution to. So what is happening today is, like the old Zen saying that when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. We are looking at every dispute as something that needs to be adjudicated instead of something that needs to be negotiated and resolved. So this is where mediation can play a very significant role in improving the quality of justice, because today the courts are so burdened because every problem is coming to the court for adjudication. So when we are able to get these problems resolved through the process of negotiation and mediation, we'll be freeing up the courts to do justice where it is deserved. So that is the only way we can improve the judicial system. Any other questions? Yeah, Mr. Anil has asked a good question. Don't you think that the language and intellect itself has resulted in conflicts? Absolutely, yes. Because every wrong thing that we do, we are also able to justify that. Because we come up with reasoned arguments in favor of, justifying anything wrong that we do. For example, if supposing, let's say that, I own a big company and I have a very powerful argument to tell my workers that, look, you're entitled only to this much and not to much more than, to what you really deserve. So I have a very powerful argument to back that. Okay, now the same power can also be used, the language and intellect can be used to come up with more rational arguments and say that, okay, what you're saying is not correct. Perhaps there's a different way of looking at it. So why don't we look at it that way? So while it has resulted in conflicts, as I pointed out in one of my slides, it has come up with more complex forms of cheating, as what Dennis Krebs calls it as cheating. But basically, it's an argument that goes against fairness and justice. So we can also come up with equally powerful arguments to advance what is fair and just.
So I can see
Erika's hand is up.
Yes. Rahul,
Erika,
could you
please
please unmute Erika?
She's not able to unmute, I think.
Yeah. Rahul, can you unmute Erika, please?
Erika, I think you can unmute now.
Yes. Hello, namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, Jawad-ji. It is an immense pleasure to have opportunity to listen your very enriching academic thoughts and your sight towards the mediation. I have had the privilege to live in India for 5 years, and I have returned back to England. So it is incredibly enriching to be again back with Indian roots. I have historical question for you. Why do we address alternative dispute resolution means mediation belonging amongst to alternative dispute resolution if the first side and the historical approach towards the mediation starts in ancient Mesopotamia 4,500 years before the Christ? So why do we still address mediation as an alternative dispute resolution if it has such long 6,000 years old history? Thank you. Namaste ji. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika.
Dhanyavad.
Thank you. I fully agree with you because I very strongly believe that it is a sin to call mediation as alternative dispute resolution, because mediation is mainstream dispute resolution. Litigation or arbitration should be called as alternative dispute resolution, because it's the fundamental thing that you do as a human being is to talk and resolve your problem, right? So that's a very, very basic way of doing it. And it was there. It existed much before the more, these conceptions of justice and, the theories of law evolved. It was existing much before that. So therefore, it is the mainstream dispute resolution. And that is where we have missed the bus by, focusing or calling it as alternate dispute resolution system and not giving it the kind of importance that it really deserves. And that is where we have lost out a lot. And that is where we are today. One of the participants put the question that why is there so much of injustice and inequity in the world? It's because we have forgotten that basic human ability to talk and resolve our differences. And that would actually, when we do that more, it will enhance our fitness and help us to evolve better. So thank you very much for that. I fully agree.
So many times in mediation, so we come across where parties have been referred to mediation after about 10, 15, 20 years of litigation. And in the meantime, the attitudes have hardened. There is so much of animosity between them that nothing really comes out of mediation. And this is something that should have taken place in the first instance. They should have got mediation.
Yeah.
And that is why, sir, I just feel that, as Erika said, that 6,000 years of history behind mediation, and yet we still don't, go to it in the first place. And what brings to my mind is the latest enactments by Uttarakhand on the Uniform Civil Code. Now, this is the code strictly governing interpersonal relations. There's marriage, there is divorce, there is succession, there is live-in relationship. But there is no mention of mediation. For everything, lodge an FIR, file a complaint, go to court. Such a recent enactment, sir. But still we haven't...
No, see, the problem, Anil, is that we are so obsessed with this, with the theories of justice that we have evolved, that we believe that justice can only be delivered by a third person sitting as a judge, and who will decide who's right and who's wrong and what is right and what is wrong. Now, what we don't realize is that in the sphere of human interactions, there is so much of complexity that, it depends on your perspective, it depends on the paradigm you're coming from, it depends on how your understanding of the whole situation is, it depends on your own psychological, the effect that it is having on you, the kind of affective mechanisms that are working in you when you're faced with a particular situation. Now, there is no scope for addressing all that in an adjudicatory process, because you have the law and you apply the law. Now, see, this is the question I've put to many judges. When I do training for judges, I always ask them this question: how many cases have you come across where you feel that party A is right, but the law does not support party A? So you have to decide in favor of party B. Your heart tells you that party B is wrong. And they have said many cases. Every judge has said, I've come across any number of cases like that. So this is what today we are facing, because we have, put human interactions into silos of rights and wrongs, forgetting that we are far more complex beings.
True.
So our intellectual capabilities, our psychological aspects, all these things are so complex that you cannot put them in those silos of rights and wrongs defined by a legislature or interpreted by the courts. So without addressing that aspect, if you're going to come directly to the court, this is where the challenge comes. Because people are now conditioned to look at it from the right and wrong perspective.
Yes.
Okay, they're not able to see each other's perspective. They're not able to communicate with each other. The greatest power that you have, the power of communication, is lost
Is lost.
when you're in a situation of conflict.
So Ms. Suvarna has raised her hand.
Yes, sir. She can't unmute.
Rahul. Not unmuted. Rahul, can you help her out, please? Ms. Suvarna, could you just unmute her?
Yeah, I think you can unmute now, sir.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah.
Hi, I have three questions interlinked. One, is there a difference between real sense of injustice and perception of injustice? If conflict arises when there is a feeling of injustice, then is it more when a person is misled to believe that there is injustice? And on this backdrop, how do you see the role of a third party in interaction between two parties? Because you spoke about third chimpanzee, and it may not feel anything, but that is not the case with humans. And many a times, especially in family disputes, we come across this situation where the parties don't really feel that there is injustice between them, but a third party believes that there's injustice. So how do you look at it from the point of mediation also?
Good question, Swarna. See, how I look at it is this, that, we have evolved norms of morality, of fairness, of good conduct from a universal perspective. Okay. Like, for example, demolishing somebody's house is unjust without following the process of law. Okay. Depriving somebody of their life and liberty is unjust. Right? Now, these are universal. There are many examples that we can go on giving about this. Now, these are all concepts of, these are all based on the universal norms of what is just and what is moral. Right? Now, here is where these general norms, there is no subjectivity here. Like, okay, you cannot apply, you cannot say that, oh, in my perception, this person doesn't deserve to live, therefore I'm going to kill him. Universally, that would be regarded as something which is immoral, which is wrong. Okay, so you deserve to be punished. Now, when it comes to dealings between people, like let's say a commercial dealing, or let's say that, in a relationship, like for example, inheritance rights, like for example, what is the status of husband and wife? How is the marriage going to work out between them? What are their mutual rights and obligations? Now here, there might be more subjective perception of fairness, of injustice, of wrong and right. Okay. So here is where you need to, where the universal concepts are involved, there cannot be two ways about it. Okay, because that has to be for the larger good of society, for the greater good, those norms have to be followed. When it comes to individual interactions, unless these individual interactions violate those larger concepts of fairness and justice, where it involves the perception of each person as to what is right and what is wrong. Now, this is where you can negotiate and resolve it, where you can communicate with each other, understand each other's perspective, and try to come to a place where you're able to work with each other, or part ways, amicably. So this is the scope for, this is where mediation can play a significant role. Okay, in helping you to resolve these conflicts that come from our respective perception of fairness. Because fairness can be very subjective. Okay, so what may be fair to me may not be fair to you. And what is fair to you? And here culture, tradition, all these things play a huge role in this. Because as I pointed out, culture, tradition, etc. are very relative. It might be specific to a particular community or to a particular place or to a particular group of people. So if you apply that culture, or if you look at those some of the cultural practices that we can see, maybe very absolutely perfect with one group of people, but it might be, absolutely abnormal or, very, what should I say, obnoxious to another group of people. So all these things keep varying. So my only point that I'm trying to make is we cannot adopt a universal standard for interpersonal interactions. That is something that is very subjective, and that's something that needs to be discussed and resolved. Not necessary that you should apply some universal standard of fairness to that, unless it's absolutely necessary or it violates such universal standards of morality or fairness or whatever.
So there is another very, very interesting question by Monica Sharma, advocate. And
Okay.
she says, do not we agree that the guidelines regarding mediation should be included in school curriculum itself to create empathy and conscience among children so that we have a fair and just society?
Absolutely necessary.
Absolutely necessary.
Absolutely necessary. No two ways about it. You catch them young, you start teaching them all these concepts of basically trying to understand each other, communicate with each other, talk to each other, right? How are we teaching that? We, as parents, we are not even setting a good example for our children to follow. What kind of communication do we have between each other? My wife and I were sitting in the eye clinic one day, and we saw this gentleman who was, the way he was talking to his wife, it was obnoxious actually. And that seemed to be his normal way of communicating with his wife. And what kind of example would such a person be setting for his children? Now, this is something that we should start. See, emotional intelligence should be cultivated from children from the very inception. So what we are doing today is we are teaching subjects like history, geography, mathematics, science. But the basic quality that you need to live as a good human being, to be able to live as a productive person in society, we are not teaching those qualities. So that should be, embedded in the curriculum and should be the, the basic thing that you need to focus more than any other subject that you teach.
So there's one question by Dr. Chitrapu Kamaraju, and he says, could you elaborate restrictive justice and transformative justice in the context of globalization and cross-border disputes?
I think what he means is restorative justice, or
must be restrictive, not restrictive.
Yeah, not restrictive. See, today with the the advanced understanding of neuroscience, psychology, and other things, what neuroscience has found is that the brain is a neuroplastic organ which can change its shape according to the environment that you grow up in or you're exposed to. So if a criminal is a criminal, it might be because of the circumstances that have molded the criminal into being a criminal. So is there a way of, dealing with that criminal from the perspective of changing that environment, helping the brain to, change itself or mold itself to a better environment and become a more productive citizen? So there are many interesting cases that are happening abroad. Like, for example, in Canada, where there was, I read about this case, and which I have told in many of my other programs also, where hate crime was committed by a teenager who murdered another teenager. It was a hate crime. And the court ordered mediation between the two mothers. The two mothers came together and decided that there was no point in punishing this child who committed the crime, because that was the environment that he grew up in. That was the only thing he learned to do. So they decided to give him a good nurturing environment, which would give him love and affection and teach him empathy and teach him how to behave as a productive member of society. The mothers got together and agreed to do this. So there's a lot of scope for reformative justice, for restorative justice, rather than, see, in our criminal justice system, the person who has already suffered suffers more, the victim. No attention is paid to the victim. What does the victim have to say about the situation? The state takes over. It is deemed to be an offense against the state. So the state steps in. There's no scope for the victim to, play any role here, except perhaps as a witness. So we need to, focus more on transformative justice and, reformative justice and restorative justice. Because as a society, if we are just simply going to, impose blanket punishments without understanding, what drove somebody to commit a particular crime, without understanding what are the, the circumstances or the environment or the situation which motivated that, or which drove that person to be the person that he or she is, without understanding that. I was reading a very pathetic account of children growing up in the Kamatipura area, which is, for those who are not in India, they may not be knowing that in Bombay, there's an area called Kamatipura, which is basically a red light area. The children there see people coming to their mothers, the customers coming and visiting the mothers, and in the presence of the children, because there is no place that the mothers can keep the children. And they witness this. And they witness the kind of abuse that the mothers undergo. So imagine a child growing up in that environment. What kind of mental makeup will the child have? And when the child does something wrong, do you blame the child when the child grows up and commits a crime? Do you blame the child, or do we blame ourselves as a society? We have failed that child. So unfortunately, our policymakers are not addressing all these aspects. And we as intellectuals are sitting quietly without doing anything. We're not even talking about it. So I think we need to start talking about all these things.
So there are no further questions. And we're also nearing the end of our scheduled time, sir. So with everybody's consent, if I can close today's session.
Thank you so much, Nivaran, Santan, Mr. Rajiv Datta, Mr. Jitendra Kumar.
Thank you all, sir, for taking us through this.
I'm amongst the organizers, so it closes down.
Thank you, Jawad. Thank you so much.
So if I can close it, sir, for a second, if you don't mind.
Allow Anil to speak.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you, Jawad, sir, taking us through this very fascinating time travel, which you have tried to condense in about 40 minutes. If we cut across centuries of, law, justice, equity, mediation. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out some time for us and sharing your experiences. Thank you, all the participants, for joining us today. We at Nivaran hope that you enjoyed this session and have gained valuable, insights and knowledge into the whole journey of dispute resolution. I also thank my colleagues at Nivaran, the Singapore Mediation Center, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, for organizing this edition of our yearly summer school. And of course, I express my gratitude to Rahul and his team for providing seamless technical support in conducting the session. Rahul and his team, they work quietly and most efficiently behind the scene and help us, all of us sitting across different time zones across the globe. We all come together in one virtual room, thanks to Rahul and his team. Before I close, a quick reminder to all of you to please join us tomorrow for what is going to be a very absorbing session on an extremely contemporary topic, which is online mediation. Our guest faculty for tomorrow will be Miss Archana Medekar. She's a mediator, a barrister, and solicitor. And your host for the session will be my colleague, Miss Anupama Aluwalia, advocate mediator. So thank you once again. Thank you for joining in. See you tomorrow and have an extremely pleasant Sunday evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, Jawad.
Thank you, sir.
Jawad, it's a wonderful analysis. We'll talk a little more because coming from an early age of a jungle Raj, because me and Santan, we used to discuss about how the justice dispensation system arose, how it arose. But we had a very primitive stage, but you got it in a very detailed one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
We'll discuss it.
But thanks to Santan and to all of you for giving me that opportunity to do some research on this and think about it. I don't know whether it made sense or not, but it's just a starting point of the discussion, is what I feel. The session can be used as perhaps a starting point for a discussion and a more profound understanding of these concepts.
Jawad, I think from the primitive stage, Stone Age, I think justice is finally maturing.
Yes. Yeah.